Hey everybody, today I am going to be reviewing The Last Jedi. This was directed, of course, by Rian Johnson. I have reviewed a lot of films on this channel, and obviously I am coming to the end of reviewing all 9 of the Star Wars films, which has been a really fascinating thing to do. It hasn't always been easy, especially the prequels and especially these new ones here. But of course, I reviewed this film initially when it did come out back in 2017, and I reviewed it pretty favorably at the time, but I always preface that by saying, I was very disconnected from Star Wars at the time. Star Wars was basically dead to me in 2017, and so I was basically rooting for it to fail, which, I don't know if that's necessarily fair to the film. So I thought, giving it some perspective after years and going back and watching all of them could really change the way I see it. If you are rooting for the downfall of Star Wars when you are watching The Last Jedi for the first time, maybe it won't bother you as much as it might bother somebody else, but that said, I think that this is the most difficult one to talk about because it is just it's such an anomaly. This is the Star Wars film that really got under people's skin and really, really divided people. A lot of people hate the film and credit Rian Johnson with officially killing Star Wars, the Star Wars that we have known up to this point. Other people see it as pushing Star Wars in a new direction that is maybe a welcome one, something that is a little bit different. Whatever you do feel, the reaction is strong and often heated. And here's the thing about The Last Jedi, especially when I'm looking at, the entire trilogy from a distance. I think it is the most interesting one of all 3, and I think it is certainly the most artistically interesting, aesthetically interesting, which in a way makes the debacle of it all the more fascinating compared to, say, the J.J. Abrams entries, like, The Force Awakens, as well as Rise of Skywalker, the 3rd film. At least with The Last Jedi, I do feel like there is at least a concept driving things home. Now, it's a horrendously executed concept, but it is a concept nonetheless. I don't know, this one, it didn't make me as viscerally angry as the Force Awakens or the Rise of Skywalker did, and yet somehow it hurts more. And I don't know what it was. Maybe it was watching all 9 of them so close together, which is something, I hadn't done before. But when I get to this particular entry, I mean, by the end of it, I was almost crying, and not in a good way. Please do not misunderstand. It was a situation where I was feeling incredibly bitter. When I look at The Force Awakens, I really just see that film as just a very sad and pathetic masquerade of the original Star Wars trilogy. It's, desperately running on the fumes and trying to capitalize off of that. And then I look at The Last Jedi, and I see that more as Star Wars in its like existential dread stage. This is Star Wars in a funhouse. So if The Last Jedi in a way is kind of like the Empire Strikes Back template that we have there, I look at Empire Strikes Back almost as like a completed Scrabble game. It's like all the words have been figured out and everything is clear and in front of you. But then you have Last Jedi, which is like a conscious decision to flip the Scrabble board over and all the pieces scatter onto the floor. I talked about Attack of the Clones making me insane. No, this felt like somebody kicked me into an entirely different dimension. This movie is like learning that you were adopted. It's one of those situations where it's like you don't know what to say. You don't know how to react. I just really felt speechless, and very rarely am I speechless after watching a film, but now watching the film, obviously with perspective, and looking back at my initial review from like 5 years ago, I do agree with certain things that I said, and I understand why I said them at the time, because like I said, there are some really artistic things about the film that I do find to be compelling, and yet in the same breath, I feel like this film, of all of the 9 Star Wars films, I almost feel like it fails the hardest. And there's something very sad about that too, in a whole nother way, just because, I do think that this film absolutely had potential. It certainly had way more potential than the J.J. Abrams entries. Last Jedi is naturally a very meta entry in the trilogy, but the entire trilogy is definitely a meta reflection on Star Wars as a piece of pop culture art or industry, whatever you want to say there. But this one is actively trying to take it in a specific direction. And I think this is the film that understands far more than the J.J. Abrams films do that Star Wars is truly experiencing a loss of identity, a spiritual crisis, since it has been bought out by Disney. So it's trying to express some of that cynicism while also deconstructing the iconic elements of Star Wars and hoping to form, I think, something new out of it. But here is the caveat with that, is that You know, if you are going to hold up a microphone and you're going to make very bold, very polarizing statements to a large crowd, it's probably best that you're making said statements without tripping all over the microphone wires at the same time. Because if I'm in that crowd, I'm just going to think, well, that person is obviously drunk. And obviously, when I watch the film, I feel the same way. It's like, obviously, these people were drunk when they did this. There's no one here that was competent. It is a train wreck that is like, wow, on the level of almost Rise of Skywalker. Not quite to that degree, but it's really not that far off in the big scheme of things. It is wanting to be like a very dramatic, very cinematic sort of movie, and yet at the same time, there's other parts of it that do feel kind of poorly made and slapped together. It has, like I said, flashes of very cool ideas, and yet nothing can ever be, formulated or appreciated due to just the horrendous editing that is going on here. And honestly, the editing here is some of the worst that I have seen of a major motion picture of this level in a long time. And just from a story perspective, it's like, I have no idea what's going on. It's like I constantly felt like I was missing something, like a scene got skipped here or there, just because of how many scenes feel strange and the cuts are so awkward. And yeah, it felt like my brain was being messed with. You get about halfway through the film and you start thinking there's no way that Rian Johnson isn't fully aware that he is trolling all of us. But it's just so confusing because, as I said, bold, very confident way of presenting itself, and yet so much of what's going on is so unclear. Never unclear in like a mysterious way, always in a very frustrating way. Everything here that has some sort of promise ends up becoming a complete waste of time, I think more than any other film in the entire trilogy. It is maybe like a 1 step forward, 50 steps back sort of situation, this entire film. It is like Johnson is like braiding a long rope and it's very intricate. He's worked really hard on it, but he's burning the other end of the rope at the same time. So you're just like, what is the point? I just can't explain to you just how much of like a self-sabotage this experience is. And not only is it sabotaging just the film, The Last Jedi, but it is sabotaging the entire trilogy. And it is sabotaging naturally Rise of Skywalker before it has even come out. But this film, like from a plot perspective, it's just whatever. It's like you've got multiple protagonists here and you have multiple climaxes, it feels like, and repeated story beats. And it's like, ugh, okay, what we should be focusing on first and foremost is Rey. And it's like, I know that's hard for me to say because everyone knows how much I hate Rey. I don't know, I feel like this would have given us a chance to really build on her and give her some flaws, maybe make her interesting and, build our emotional relationship with her. And we need that for her and a lot of these different characters so that the third film can ultimately be conclusive in a satisfying way. But no, Rey does get lost in the shuffle because everyone's story here, it feels like, is on equal playing field. It's like they're all kind of treated on the same level with the same kind of level of dramatic tension, which makes everything feel naturally less meaningful, and it's all just kind of monotonous. And also, you want to talk about how awkward the tone is for the prequels, myself included. Obviously, I reviewed them and I had a lot to say about just how uncomfortable the tone was for those films for me. But then I look at this one and it's just like, again, it's like we're knocked into an entirely different dimension here. It feels like, I don't know, it's like, again, it's trying to be very serious, but it's also almost like it's like a knockoff of like an Adult Swim sort of comedy, but like a really bad one, because this is honestly one of the least funny Star Wars films of all of them. And I say that after having reviewed Attack of the Clones. And then, yeah, you're mixing it with this like surrealistic, more cerebral stuff, and then it feels also like this big samurai epic, yet it has no idea how to do any of this. It has no idea how to create any sort of spectacular sequences, and it can't even set up the simplest gags. As I said, though, there are things I did like, and I do feel like I need to talk about those things. I do actually appreciate the meta-ness that they are going for to an extent. After the prequels, I don't know, it felt very warranted to me just because this film is calling out a lot of the things that I wish they did in the prequels. They're calling out the Jedi for being very ignorant, and they're calling a lot of those morals into question. And again, I can almost admire just like the rebellious nature of this film, just really wanting to come up with a concept that is bold and is definitely going to polarize people and running with it. But unfortunately, I just can't get behind it because of the result of it. But at least it is probing the nature of darkness and lightness and, heroes and villains, what they mean. And it's also questioning just the whole nature of the adventure fable and how it has changed over time. time. But it's gotta be done right, and that's the thing. It's like when you watch the opening of this film, oh my God, it's just like, it's disorienting as fuck. It feels like you just walked into a theater on accident and it's like in the middle of the third act in this big battle sequence and you're like, oh, I am in the wrong theater. Like that is the feeling that it gives you. It's like, who are these people? What, where, who died? And like, what is this? Bleh. It's like, I so don't care. And I gave up so long ago. Apparently like the First Order is finding the rebel base here. And it's like, I didn't even know they had a base. No one even told us where the base is or anything about it. And as I said, the humor is special in this film. And the initial gag that is at the beginning of the film, I think is very, very important. It says a lot about just the entire tone of everything. It's just that Luke is receiving the lightsaber from Rey, which is, we're building the entire Force Awakens film to that moment. And here we are, we're at that huge climactic moment, and Luke just throws the lightsaber off a cliff. And it's meant to be a very careless sort of gesture. And I remember in the theaters seeing that, and I remember some laughs, but it didn't feel like genuine laughter. It felt like kind of like a nervous laughter, like we're not really sure what's happening. And sure, it's just mainly a metaphor as I see it. Rian Johnson basically tossing all of J.J. Abrams' entire Star Wars philosophy just down the drain. And I remember for myself seeing General Leia become basically Superman in the first act of The Last Jedi, and I just, at that point, it was just like, what am I watching? Even that is not clear. Laura Dern in this film is just like, I don't really understand the purpose of her character at all. It's like she's like this alpha power bitch who comes in and she's gonna take over and take care of business, and it's clear that we're supposed to dislike her to a degree because, she is punishing our heroes and she is keeping them from their mission. And yet in the end, it's like out of nowhere, she is apparently really cool because Leia likes her. And Leia is this legend, of course, and, legendary badass ladies gotta stick together. The Dern character clearly serves an important function, and it's like, I have no idea whether or not we're supposed to hate her or love her, even, once her character is finished. And again, it's like, there are no protagonists, and there are no stakes, there is no tension, and everything is so confusing and on the same level. It's just sabotaging every single character in this movie. And it's like, when I look at the side characters, especially somebody like Poe, it is sabotaging him yet again. And that makes no sense to me because he was done so dirty in The Force Awakens by disappearing in the entire, middle chunk of the film. And it's like, well, this would be a good time to kind of build that character, but no, they don't. He's just tossed aside yet again. And Finn in this movie, oh my God, it's like his whole side story is one of the most useless, one of the worst side stories ever. It is, I will say, watching it again, it was visually interesting for sure. And it is definitely trying to set itself apart, I think, from the other films in the trilogy, which is, something this whole trilogy desperately needs to be a little bit different. But it fails so hard conceptually. They really could have used this to build the character dynamics between both Finn and Poe. It would have been nice for them to stick together and also just build more of the character dynamics within the Resistance. Or it could do, what initially was important for the Finn character in Force Awakens and flesh out more that the character's identity, going from becoming a stormtrooper to joining the Resistance. But no, again, just thrown out the window, not important. And you want to talk about dirty. Luke Skywalker is done so dirty in this film. And it's like, I totally understand and respect Mark Hamill being as vocally upset about it as he was. He should have been more upset, in my opinion. It's just so horrible. And his presence in The Last Jedi basically proves, like I said in that review, that the entire concept behind Force Awakens is a complete failure and a waste. Because the First Order is putting all of these resources into going after this guy, stopping Luke Skywalker, and then we get to the island and it's like, yeah, he's just an old guy and he's by himself on an island, cranky as shit, here to spoil everyone's fun. And remind us that the old Luke Skywalker we all know is gone, and that's in the past, man. And I don't want people to misunderstand. I think that could work if it was written well. I can see Luke Skywalker in this film maybe being a little bit bitter, maybe a little bit cynical, a little bit turbulent. But I do not see this guy becoming as dead in the soul as he does in this film especially when you look at how Return of the Jedi ended and you look at, you know, his arc in all three of the original films. It was just so triumphant in the end, and it's like we don't have enough to go off of to know what happened to Luke Skywalker, I think, in order for that to feel consistent, that, you know, going into that cynical point of view that he has here. It just feels way too out of character for him. It feels very un-Star Wars fundamentally. And I have said in a previous review that I almost don't consider the new three films canon compared to the George Lucas films, just because, you know, all of them just in tone feel very, very un-Star Wars to me. But yeah, when I look at all three of these films, and I think I said this already, they do feel like, you know, millennial digital art paintings. And it's going more in this film, like I said, more for that high art. It's looking for more kind of poetic imagery, and it's going more for like a Kurosawa look. Japanese archetypal heroes and such, which is beautiful and interesting, but again, not quite right for this particular trilogy, for, you know, if it's fitting in with the 9. It's like, sure, I think we could head more into a different, you know, direction when it comes to the artistry of everything, but I do think it's important to keep those little touches in there. I think it's important to have a little bit more of that cheesiness, and again, just kind of the fun crispness of the original trilogy. And yet, some of the special effects in this movie are just jaw-droppingly amazing. Some of the best I think I've ever seen. And it's like, I'll see something that just takes my breath away. And then maybe in the next scene, there'll be some special effects and I go, oh, those aren't very good, are they? They look kind of cheap. How many times can I use the word inconsistent in this review? I love the concept of the salt planet. And when, you know, obviously they make contact with it, they touch the salt, it becomes red. That's just such a fantastic visual idea. It reminds me of something like from Ran, you know, the great Kurosawa epic. Color blocking plays a huge part in a lot of the battle sequences there. So to see that kind of carry over, I just thought that was a fantastic idea. And no, it sucks. It's like you are waiting for the most epic battle scene ever. And, you know, it is reminiscent, surely, of the Hoth planet battle, one of the greatest. But no, they just shit all over it again, and they make just a really lame, anticlimactic buzzkill of an experience. And then Rey comes in the Millennium Falcon out of nowhere, I guess channeling Han Solo a la A New Hope, I guess. And I don't know what it was, but when she comes over and she like goes, woo, I like this. I don't know what it was, but I thought I was going to kill her. I thought I was going to leap through my TV screen and strangle her. I don't know what came over me, but I hate Rey. I just almost lost my shit. It's like anytime I see these characters being like, woohoo, in the traditional Star Wars way, but in this new trilogy, I just can't stand it. Because it's just like, it feels like they haven't earned any of it. But of course, you know, Rey always comes in to save the day, and Luke does nothing. Literally, he does nothing. It is one of the biggest jerk-off moments of all time. Still tossing and turning after I have seen the film, I'm like, is this some sort of meta-commentary artistic statement, or is it one of the biggest practical jokes played on an audience ever? I don't even know. It's like, okay, they kill Snoke, which, you know, he was obviously meant to be like the major antagonist in the trilogy, but obviously nobody cared about him. He was boring, you know, from the beginning, but at the same time, it's like if you're just going to kill him off like that, it's like from a, you know, story standpoint, from just a writing perspective, it's like, what the hell is wrong with you? You've got to think about your conclusion, the film that is going to come after this one, and you are already setting up Rise of Skywalker to fail so hard, you know, just by killing off villains randomly and leaving us nothing to build from. When I reviewed Rise of Skywalker recently, and I mentioned The Last Jedi, and I said that Johnson hates Star Wars, at least I thought that he did. I'm going to retract that statement because I actually don't think he hates it anymore, having seen the whole trilogy again. I think his intentions maybe are noble in certain lights, but it is a complex thing. I do think he's definitely cynical about Star Wars and cynical in terms of the direction it has gone, but I think he's trying to present maybe like a mix of emotions. But yeah, I don't know what else to say about it, really. It's just like, as I said, I don't think it's as bad for me, at least, as the Abrams ones, because at least it tried to be something more than just a fan film. I kind of argue that the entire new trilogy for Star Wars, that whole thing, just collectively, I think that is the death of Star Wars. But I think the realization of it happening, that's happening in The Last Jedi. We have torn down the hero tropes and the concepts of destiny as no longer meaningful in a mythological sense with this particular film. So heroes like Luke Skywalker, all that they were built up to be in the original trilogy, now that sort of success, it can kind of belong to anyone. That's kind of how I read the conclusion of The Last Jedi. And so when you see that child at the very end of the film, that random child, and he has that resistance ring, the rebel ring, it's like, you can look at that from Johnson's perspective as like, oh, this is a signal for change. It is a signal for now we want to take Star Wars in different directions away from the Skywalker legacy and see what we can come up with. But from my perspective, I see it more as, well, now just any random child has that capability to become the next Luke Skywalker. So therefore, it kind of feels meaningless as a story. The stakes no longer are meaningful. And ultimately, Star Wars is no longer fun to talk about. It's like, wouldn't it be great if this left us with like a titillating, like, ooh, we're very intrigued and excited about things, but no. Like, at least to me, I sit here and I think, we need to put Star Wars away for a very, 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 very long time. Of course, that won't happen, but I think that's what should have happened. And I'm not saying that there isn't still, good Star Wars content to be made, but this particular trilogy has no idea how to usher us into that new era with any sort of excitement, any sort of dignity, especially, because it is run by Disney. So yes, this Star Wars film, of all of them, even though I find it fascinating from certain perspectives, I think it is one of the biggest, most polarizing, most confusing failures ever. And I think it's one of the most fascinating, like, I would love to have been a fly on the wall, when it came to the transition between Abrams to Johnson and then back. I'm just so curious how all of that happened. Maybe one day there will be a movie about it or a documentary, but yeah, I'm just shocked that something on this scale resulted in this, and that they were able to get away with that. Almost, just that is fascinating in itself. But this one definitely left me speechless, like none of the other ones did. And obviously, if you watch those reviews, that's really saying something. But I've really enjoyed watching all 9 of these movies. Really, it was something I didn't plan on initially, and then it just kind of happened, and I'm really, really glad I did it. Maybe at some point I will do like Rogue One or the Solo stuff, whatever, but for now, I'm just gonna kind of stick to these 9, and again, I hope you guys enjoyed it, but that is the review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commission portraits, and I also sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below, and if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who are wonderful. Guys, thank you so much for your support. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.